Emily Bryant, founder and tax advisor at All About Accounting. Welcome to the 1099 Tax Compliant AF presentation, where we're going to detangle all of the nines that feel like they're plaguing your life as an entrepreneur. So let's get started. So what forms are we going to be talking about? Form 1099-K that you will receive, Form 1099 NEC that you may receive and may need to issue, Form 1099 Miscellaneous that most of you probably won't see, Form W9 that you will want to collect and might need to fill out, Form W8-BEN and W8-BEN-E that you might need a non-US contractor to fill out, and Form 1042-S that you may need to issue to your foreign workers. We'll dive into each of these and how they relate to each other. We can categorize these forms into two buckets: the forms used to collect taxpayer data and forms that report income to the IRS and you get a copy. When they're categorized this way, it might become obvious to you that you need these forms in order to prepare these forms. Now, let's dive deeper into each of these forms and how they impact you. Form W9. What is it? It's a convenient form that helps you collect tax information from U.S. taxpayers. This doesn't get sent to the IRS unless specifically asked for, and it's just a means for you to be able to collect the information that you need. And here's why you need it. Because you're required to determine if you need to file a Form 1099 NEC or 1099 Miscellaneous, and this form helps you do that. Or it acts as proof that you didn't have to file those forms. It is not weird in the business world to ask for or be asked for a W-9. Additionally, the IRS accepts other means of collecting taxpayer data like a form or a signed written statement, etc. So when you sign up for Hyperwallet, they collect all the same information the W-9 would ask for, but they do it up front and via their own portal. Stripe is the same way, Square is the same way, same with PayPal. They have all the means of collecting that information up front and not using the form. And that's okay. It's not weird or scary. People are just trying to follow the law. They are not trying to steal your identity. It is best practice to have your contractor or vendor fill out Form W-9 before you ever pay them. So let's have a look at how to fill out this form. On line 1, you're going to put your legal name as it appears on your tax return. So if you file your business taxes on Schedule C, you will look at Form 1040 page 1, which is your personal name, and include any initials or suffixes like junior, senior, the first, the second, etc. If you file your business taxes as an S Corp, you will look at Form 1120S page 1, which is your business name. That will go on line 1. If you file your business taxes as a partnership, then you would look at Form 1065 page 1, which is your business name again. This is not optional, so make sure that this line is filled in because this is the name that gets reported on your 1099. If you put your personal name on line 1, then on line 2 is where you will enter your LLC name if you have one, your business name as registered with your city or county if that is required. You'd have to check with your city or county to be sure, or just your TPT store name if the other two are not applicable to you. Line 3 is where most people mess up. You can choose only one of the 7 boxes, and some of the boxes look like they have the same options, but they're different. If you file taxes on Schedule C, you will always check this box. Whether you're an LLC or not, this is the box you check. If you are an LLC who elected to be an S corporation and you file your taxes as an S corp, then you will check this box and write S in this field. If you're an LLC but you're a partnership, filing a partnership tax return because you are in business with somebody else, you check this same box, but you'd put a P in this field. This section of boxes is if you're incorporated, meaning you filed with your state to create a corporation, which is different from an LLC. Corporations have Inc., Corp, or LTD at the end of their names, not LLC. If that's you, then you would check the appropriate box whether you're a C Corp, partnership, or S Corporation. Line 5 and 6 is for your address, and that needs to match your tax return. So if you're filing on Schedule C, this needs to match your address on your Form 1040. If you're filing as an S Corporation, it needs to match the address listed on your Form 1120S. And if you're a partnership, it needs to match the address on your 1065. See where I'm going with this? Lines 4 and 7 are very unlikely to apply to you, so you can leave those blank. If you want to learn more about them, I recommend reading the instructions for Form W-9 on the IRS website, linked here. Now, on to the taxpayer identification numbers that most people get wrong. If you checked this box, then you're going to put your Social Security number in this box. It does not matter if you have an EIN. You have to put your Social Security number if you file on your Schedule C. If you checked this box or any of these boxes, you're going to put your EIN in this box. Now the last thing to do is sign and date at the bottom and give it back to the person that requested it. But if you're the one that requested it, review it and make sure that it's filled out properly. The number of times that I've received a copy of a W-9 where they've checked more than one box in a section is pretty well most of the time. Now keep in mind that this form is not required as the only means of collecting this information. Many third-party payment processors like PayPal, Stripe, Hyperwallet, they will have you answer a bunch of questions during the setup. And that's okay. It's completely allowed. Just know that is the reason they're asking for this stuff, and your Social Security number, your EIN, okay? They're just recreating this form in a much more user-friendly way. Again, it's not weird. They're just following the law. Now, let's go have a look at our next information collection form. It's the W-8-BEN for foreign individuals and the W-8-BEN-E for foreign corporations. Form W-8-BEN. What is it? This form is used to collect tax information from non-U.S. citizens or residents, also known as non-resident aliens. So why is it so important? Because you need it to prove to the IRS that you did not need to send them a Form 1099 because they are not subject to U.S. taxes. This is your evidence. You want to be able to hold up a piece of paper if the IRS asks and say, see, they signed this, and it says I didn't have to do it. TPT has a global presence, and as we work with contractors or sellers in other countries, you need to be aware of the record-keeping requirements that apply to you. And it's basically this form. Generally speaking, with a lot of exceptions because of tax treaties, you are required to withhold 30% of your payments to your foreign contractors unless they have filled out Form W-8-BEN or W-8-BEN-E and it indicates you don't need to. As a quick side note, this form expires every 3 years from the date that it was signed. So if you are working with a foreign contractor for multiple years, know that you'll need to request an updated form every 3 years. There are 4 main categories of citizenship and residency status, or lack thereof. Number 1, let's have a look. It is U.S. citizen. They pay taxes on their worldwide income. So for them, we want to ask for a W-9 from them. Permanent resident, which is also a green card holder or a resident alien. They also pay tax on their worldwide income, and we are going to use Form W-9 for them as well. They are treated much like U.S. citizens. A non-resident alien. This is someone who is in the United States for a time and is allowed to work. They pay U.S. taxes on the income earned while they are in the U.S. So for them, you want to request Form W-8-BEN or W-8-BEN-E. An alien. This is someone who is not living or working or visiting the U.S. They do not have any U.S. source income, meaning that the work that they are doing is not performed in the U.S. It's at their house. This is where we see a lot of foreign contractors fall for teacher sellers. So for them, just get a statement saying they are not subject to U.S. taxes because they have no U.S. source income. Additionally, you, as the U.S.-based business hiring a foreign worker are required to fill out Form 1042S, even if there is a tax treaty that completely exempts the non-resident alien from any withholdings. This is kind of like the 1099 NEC equivalent, but we'll circle back to this in a few minutes. So let's have a look at the W-8 Ben. Part 1 is pretty self-explanatory. My only comment here is that, yes, you need to fill out your foreign tax ID number. For Canada, that's your SIN number, which is your social insurance number. For Australia, that's your TFN, your tax file number. For the UK, that's your NINO, national insurance number. Basically, the number your government gives you to identify you. You get it. Basically, the Social Security number equivalent. Part 2 is where people kind of panic. So let's have a look. If you are a non-resident alien, you're likely to have backup withholdings unless a tax treaty says differently. This is either the default 30% rate that I mentioned before, or you might have a reduced rate outlined in a tax treaty with your country's citizenship. Luckily, the IRS made a super handy PDF that outlines the details and tax treaty reference line number for you. I've linked it right here. Here's an example of what it might look like if the worker is from Canada, comparing that to the IRS tax treaty table. And here is a list of tax treaties if you need to dig deeper. As a quick summary, non-resident aliens are foreigners working in the U.S., meaning they now have U.S.-sourced income. They may or may not need taxes withheld from their pay, so you need to check the tax treaties previously linked. You will then also need to file Form 1042S, regardless of whether those withholdings happened or not. We are not going to look into this or Form 1042S in greater detail because I don't believe it will apply to many of you, and I don't want to add to your confusion or spend time on something that isn't widely applicable. If I'm wrong, feel free to reach out to me directly and I may be able to offer additional support with regard to Form 1042S. I really just want to make sure people are aware that it exists in this specific scenario, which is really you need to know where your workers are working from. If you or your worker is classified as an alien, then there is no withholding and it is recommended that you request a written and signed and dated statement from the foreign worker saying that they are not subject to U.S. taxes because they have no U.S. sourced income and are a citizen of fill in the blank of the country that they are working in and from. Lastly, if your worker is classified as an alien, then you also do not need to worry about filing Form 1042S. If your face looks like this right now, I feel you. This is hard stuff and generally pretty new to a lot of teacher sellers. So let's take a brief pause. 3 deep breaths, okay? All right, let's keep going. You got this. I know I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating, and I'm going to say it again. You should be asking for Form W-9 or W-8 Ben or W-8 Ben E before you ever pay your vendors. Your contractor's refusal to give you the information that you need is not an excuse the IRS allows for failing to file the proper forms. These penalties fall on you. And is that a risk you want to take? Probably not. So ask for the form. Those who have TPT stores, this is why Hyperwallet withheld payouts if your information wasn't filled out properly. Square and Stripe do the exact same thing. If they can't follow the law, they sure as hell are not going to put themselves into a situation where they are at risk. And since 1099s are based on when the payouts happen, if there was no payout, there was no reason for a 1099, which gets them out of the risk. Also, it is not weird to be asked or ask for this form, okay? So stop thinking that people are going to be stealing your SSN for asking for this or your EIN or other basic data. Businesses need it in order to stay compliant with the IRS. It's not weird. It's not weird. Who do you need to ask to fill out Form W-9 or W-8 Ben or W-8 Ben E? Is you need to look at all of your vendors. That includes your virtual assistants, your business coaches, marketing gurus, your accountant, your Pinterest managers. I know people are still hating on Pinterest, okay? Your reel creators, your product photographers, all of these kinds of people. Keep in mind that you might be one of these vendors for somebody else. So, if you get asked to fill out a W-9, do it. And now you know why they're asking. So in short, anyone you pay for services. But Emily, what about courses? Great question. E-courses that a lot of people have created on Kajabi, Thinkific, Teachable are generally products. But some have a service component to them, which would make it included in your 1099 threshold calculations. The group coaching, the let me help you by answering these questions that you have, the closed Facebook groups that are attached to the course. They're all ways a service component gets added and is part of what you're paying for. So now that you have collected the necessary information from your vendors up front, let's figure out what to do with that information. We're going to have a look at these 4 forms, the 1099 miscellaneous, the 1099 NEC, Form 1042S, and Form 1099K. Here's how each form relates to the previous forms that we've talked about. So for both forms 1099 miscellaneous and 1099 NEC, you'll use the information from Form W9. For the 1042S, you'll use the information found on Forms W8Ben or W8Ben-E. And for the 1099K, you are very, 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 very unlikely to ever issue this form. It'll only be something you receive. Form 1099 miscellaneous. This form is used to report a variety of business transactions that are $600 or more, and it's most commonly used to report rent that you made to the person or company you are giving this 1099 miscellaneous form to. With the clients that I work with in the TPT community, you're more likely to receive one of these forms rather than issue them, probably from Amazon Kindle Publishing for any book royalties or something else kind of similar. Form 1099 NEC is all non-employee compensation. You will receive this form if you provided services for the work that you do for another business and you are not an employee. That means you are not on their payroll, you are not getting a W-2. Most people think of this as a contractor, but I find the verbiage a little bit limiting. As an example, you might not think that your accountant that prepares your taxes once a year is a contractor, but they are a vendor you might still need to issue a Form 1099 NEC for. If you hired someone to provide you with a service, then you need to issue them a Form 1099 if they meet certain thresholds. First thing you're going to do is you're going to get a summary of all of the vendors that you've paid and the amount that you've paid them. You are then going to look at number 1. Did you pay them $600 or more? Everything below $600, push it to the side. We don't care about it. For all of the ones that you did pay $600 to, was it for a service? If the answer is no, put a line through it. We don't need it. If yes, did you pay them over $600 via cash, check, Zelle, direct bank transfer, or bill pay where you logged into your online banking and then initiated the payment from there? Do not count any payments made via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, or any other third-party payment system like Stripe, Square, Honeybook, QBO payments, etc. towards the $600 threshold. Now that we're still shortening the list here, of that list, does their W-9 that you've already collected, does that indicate that they need to be issued a 1099? If the answer is yes, then now you're left with a list of vendors that you need to issue a 1099 for. Let's talk about how to actually file this form. I recommend using online software. It's typically about $5 per form to e-file, but you'll be glad you didn't have to go and buy the specific and special paper needed to print and then mail it to the IRS. Here's a few websites that will help with this. Next, we have eFile4Biz.com, there's tax1099.com, 1099online.com, and eFile1099now.com. So you're going to use the information that you collected on Form W-9 in order to help prepare the Form 1099. We're going to look at the name from line 1, the address, and the Social Security or EIN number. If they checked any of these boxes, then you need to issue a 1099. We're looking at the LLC or sole proprietor, or the LLC taxed as a partnership. If they checked any of these boxes, then you need to issue a 1099. We're looking at the LLC or sole proprietor, or the LLC taxed as a partnership. If they checked any of these boxes, then you do not need to issue a 1099, which is basically any form of incorporated, put in any of this space here. Do not send a 1099. If they are an LLC but taxed as an S corporation or C corporation, do not send them a 1099. Because you don't have to file it. Then, in box 1, you're going to put the amount of money you paid them that was $600 or more paid via cash, check, Zelle, or bank transfer that I previously described. There is one exception that I want to mention, and that is when looking at the entity type. If it is a law firm, you need to issue them a 1099 miscellaneous or 1099 NEC regardless of their entity type. And that's it. E-file using your system of choice and give a copy to your vendor. And make sure you do this before January 31st. Before we move on, let's take a quick pause and enjoy this babbling brook. Apparently, there is scientific evidence that the sound and sight of water is a stress reliever. So I'm proud of you for taking the time to listen to this presentation and educate yourself on an area of your business that can be extremely overwhelming. All right, that's enough of that. Moving on. The last form we're going to cover is the Form 1099-K. This form is one that you will receive. It's not a form that you will issue, ever. This form is meant to report the amounts you receive via a payment processor, such as Hyperwallet, PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, Square, QBO Payments, Honeybook, WooCommerce Payments, all of those kinds of third-party payment processors. While the tax law was supposed to have changed for 2022, the IRS decided to say, just kidding, and revert to the old thresholds. So now there will very likely be a mix of companies following the new rules and those following the old rules, since most of the big companies already had their programs ready to process according to the new rules before the IRS was like, nah, just kidding, we're going to extend this transition period. So let's have a look at these rules side by side. The old rules are that you would receive a Form 1099-K if you receive payments of $20,000 or more and they were comprised of at least 200 transactions. The new rules drastically dropped the threshold, both in terms of dollar amount and transaction volume. So now it's the same as the other 1099s we just talked about, which is great for consistency's sake, but so many business owners are uneducated on how to file Form 1099 NEC or miscellaneous correctly that there's a big risk that this will cause a lot of duplicated income being reported to the IRS. Now the new rules is it's $600 or more if payments received via that third-party payment processor. That's it. This means for you that it is more important than ever for you to know what is supposed to be reported. Do not just rely on somebody else telling you how much you made. You're supposed to do that. It's up to you. Good bookkeeping. Now let's talk about why we should care. Or should we care? As the issuer of these forms, yes, we care. Very much we care. Because they are our penalties associated for failing to file these forms. But as the receiver of these forms, no, we don't. Why? Because your good bookkeeping already has the same information. You should actually be able to look at your records and confirm the amounts reported on each of the 1099 forms. The only time that we would be concerned and actually care about the Form 1099s that you receive, even though you have good bookkeeping, is if they over-reported or duplicated that income. Then we have to go address it. But you have good bookkeeping in order to know that. This is especially important if you have an account like Venmo or PayPal where you're mixing business and personal transactions. As a side note, I strongly advise you to untangle that mess and keep your business activity and personal activity separate. But seriously, this is important, okay? So have a look at the scenario. This is especially important if you have an account like Claire mixed her business and personal Venmo account because it's easy for her clients to pay via Venmo, but she also reimburses her friends for her share of dinner and drinks out. At the end of the year, Claire might receive a 1099-K from Venmo for some of these personal transactions if they were not flagged properly for not for goods and services in Venmo. Some people mess that up, okay? Those personal transactions are not supposed to be taxable, but in this case, the IRS will think that it is because it was reported on the 1099-K. This will trigger an automatic notice if she reports the amount less than what is shown on the 1099. And she may end up paying more in taxes than she needs to as a result if she doesn't have good bookkeeping in order to identify that, no, that was wrong, and then handle it appropriately. So what do you do if that happens? First, check all of your 1099s that you received and make sure that your records match. If they don't, ask for clarification. Try and resolve the discrepancy, and if the resolution is, oh, there's a personal transaction in there, then you can request that they correct the 1099, or you will need to report the full amount of the 1099 and then make an adjustment of that amount that is incorrect, which will net out to the correct amount on your tax return. So as an example, if you had a 1099 that was $1,000, but you recognize that $100 of that was personal, you would need to report $1,000 as gross receipts on your tax return, and then as an other business income, you would put $100 as personal transactions incorrect 1099. That's going to net out to the correct amount, which was the $900 that you were expecting, but something was amiss. All right, I've talked about good bookkeeping. But what is it? What makes good bookkeeping? Well, let's have a quick look at some of the most important bits of information that you need to keep track of in order to easily facilitate this compilation. All your transactions need the following. Number 1, a date. This is so you know which tax year that transaction fell into. Number 2, a customer or vendor name, aka the payee. This is so you know who you might need to issue a 1099 to or who to expect one from. Number 3, the amount. This is so you know how much has been paid to that person to check if they need a 1099. It also helps you identify how much of a business deduction you get. Number 4 is you need to know the account used to pay or receive that money. This will help you determine if those amounts count towards the 1099 filing threshold. This is the single most important thing. Kidding, they're all really important. But knowing which account it came from is going to be how you spot duplicated income. If you are able to see that you paid a vendor via check for $1,000, but then PayPal another $1,000, but they're going to issue you a 1099 for $2,000, PayPal might give you a 1099-K, and now you have this duplicated income of the 1099. We don't want that. That is how you catch this. Number 5, what did you buy or what was the money received for? This is so you can check to see if this was a service to be included in checking if you need to file a 1099. We've created this flowchart to help you identify whether or not you need to issue your vendors a 1099. You can download it here for free if you're interested. And if you're looking to outsource this task and more to an accounting firm that knows your industry, we'd love to meet you. You can schedule a call with Rachel, our Client Services Director, by going to our website at allaboutaccounting.com and the contact page, also linked here. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the presentation. If you haven't already, we have a Facebook group that you can join. It's called the Tax Tips for the TPT Community. And if you don't already follow us on Instagram, we also have an Instagram account there, and our handle is linked right here.